Welcome to the Lean Champion Spotlight with Justin Newyard. Today's guest is Dominic Desmarais. Dominic, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
Awesome, man. Awesome. So, Dominic, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into construction, how you got exposed to lean, those kind of things.
Yeah, sure. I got in construction kind of by mistake. I studied engineering in university, and I specialized in what was called the design of production systems. So how do you lay out and organize factories and get factories to be productive? So that's where I started my career. I spent about the first third of it remodeling plants. And one day I got a call from a company who was in modular construction, so doing a fair amount of prefabrication and offsite full size volumetric buildings. And they had two factories at the time, and they wanted to implement lean, and they needed some expertise around helping to get this organized. So that was back in 2008. Um, so I moved, and I accepted the challenge. I thought it was interesting to work in a factory that had no machine. It was all people. And I was curious to see what I would learn from this experience. So I moved over, and we started to deploy lean and standard work and 5S, and we've overlaid an ERP system to manage the plant. So it was basically assembly line style modular construction. So I did this for a few years, and then I got to be responsible for the facility, which happened to me by surprise. And yeah, so I ran a plant of 250 workers. We were doing 5-6 million a month, and I did this for 5-6 years. And then I had to apply the things that I used to sell around lean leadership, and now I had the steering wheel in my hand, and I had to figure that out. So did this for a while. And yeah, and in 2017 I got a call from a general contractor. And again, I thought, I never thought in my life that I'd work for a general contractor doing lean. And they had some interest, and were curious about that. And IPD was getting popular in Canada. So yeah, so I jumped board, and then I learned about the paradigm of lean construction, not lean from the Toyota perspective, if you will, and dive deep in the last planner system and IPD and target value design and all this great jazz. And yeah, been doing this ever since. So
Hell
that's kind of how it happened. So yeah, I've been in construction for 15, 16 years. So the bulk of my career now, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
hell yeah, man. That's awesome. Let me backtrack for a second. What was your first exposure to lean?
Well, I first was exposed to lean in school. So it
Okay.
would have been like late 1990s. So when I studied how to lay out factories, lean was kind of a topic in our curriculum. But my first company I started working for, was called Thomas and Betts at the time, was quite serious about deploying lean. So I got exposed to lots of training, did some SMEDs, and we were being coached at the time by LEI, the Lean Enterprise Institute. And yeah, so that was my full-time job when I started, working with people in the plant, and people in management, and redesigning work cells and redesigning departments. And I got the chance to relay out a factory in Western Canada. And when I got to modular, it rarely occurs, but I got to actually fly down to Denver. We opened up a shop in Denver, and I had a empty building, and I got to sit in the middle of the plant with my laptop on a couple pallets, and really draw
Yeah.
where the line were going to be, how material was going to flow, and basically lay the bone for this. So yeah, so I've been at this for over 20 years now, and it's been a great run. I'll never do anything else. People say, well, you drank the Kool-Aid when you were young, and I say, it's not Kool-Aid, it's real juice. So anybody
I
who
like
tries
that.
this, anybody who tries to tell you that this is Kool-Aid is wrong. So it's good thing. It's not
I'm
easy,
not
but
drinking.
you're not
I'm not
drinking.
drinking Kool-Aid right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Drinking beer? No,
No, not quite. Not quite.
not quite yet.
So let me ask you this: what was your interesting? You say, "Hey, it's not Kool-Aid; it's real juice," right? What was your first impression? I know a lot of people. Sometimes their first impression of lean is either A, it's too good to be true, or B, how am I actually going to apply this? What was your first impression as you were learning about it in school and in your first role?
Uh, well, for me, it was. I mean, I guess it was a bit different. That goes back to my. I was raised basically on my uncle's farm, and as a family, and I always worked with the leader of the business, which was my uncle. And when I started in the industry, for me, it was counterintuitive to not have your leaders or your managers not supporting workers, right? So to me, it's not lean that never made sense. It's traditional way of managing, of creating this fight and this separation between the people who do the work and the people who think about the work. That never really made sense to me. If you really want to be able to improve the work, and in some of our early training, people would say, the more time you spend in fighting inside your own company between people, the less
Mm,
energy and the less time you can go out and fight on the marketplace
mm,
against your competition, right? And
yeah.
so for me, lean made lean is what makes sense. What doesn't make sense is traditional management. Um, but where I decided to really put the emphasis is really when we did improvements, and we started to see the types of benefits that could emerge out of deploying this mindsets and philosophies and tools, where the customer could benefit, and the employees could benefit, and the company could benefit, right? So you're not pegging one against the other. Everybody can benefit if you get management and the workers focusing on servicing the customer better. So you're it's the removal of yeah, that infighting, I guess, and that separation, that costs money, and that wastes time. And if you could just flush that out, you'll be more productive, and more adaptable than your competition.
You'll create win-win situations, right? That doesn't have to be a loser.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be. You have to have a loser. Yeah, if you create win-win situation, you're better off. Everybody feels energized, and everybody wants to contribute more, and um, and everybody wants to give the little extra and give their energy, and then the sum of all that energy is what helps things move forward. Um, I had a couple of stories where I was in a cable tray business back in the days, and
Mm,
we reorganized the department. It really cost nothing. We just create standard work, reorganize how the work was going to be delivered, change the way we communicate information in the plant, and the outcome of this was a drastic reduction in parts in the shipping area, and I mean, even me, I couldn't even believe that what we had put in place were producing those kinds of results, right? So, 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 so here we are, trying to sell this thing, and then we do some implementation, and I couldn't even explain it. Um, and so I got really curious, into trying to really understand, why is it that we're traditionally doing that actually doesn't work, and how do we get rid of all that nonsense, and ultimately create flow. And flow is an outcome, but it's the most productive way to do work. So good flow, assuming that what you're building is going to be sold. But yeah.
Hell yeah. So tell me about, you mentioned IPD earlier, target value delivery. Tell me about some of the things at Graham that you guys are implementing.
Yeah, so Graham was one of the first company, or the first company to do to participate in an IPD project in this country. So quite proud of that. I wasn't here at the time, so the credit goes to the folks who were there before me, but and the leadership of the company for taking on that model. But internally, we are in the IPD world. We play in that delivery model. Our team are deploying the last planner system and pull planning and all this good stuff. For me, this is really the place to start. I believe. You have to have a resemblance of a production control system if you want to be able to attach every other things to it and create flow. That's one of the things that actually works in manufacturing. We have a theory for controlling production that we can use. So in construction, to me, the last planner is where this starts, and from there we've had just-in-time delivery of material and material logistics and 5S and those kinds of things. But as I often say, if you don't have good production control and people don't trust when the work is going to happen, the job gets loaded with material just in case, not just in time. Right. And so to me, the predecessor to being able to declutter job sites and create flow is really things like last planner. So a fair amount of efforts in that. And we're building a organization with local coaches now, and so we can help project teams. So that's part of what I do now is kind of building our internal curriculum, our internal training material, and a coaching plan. So whenever we go on jobs, we can tailor our approach and make sure that we implement and work with the project team to give them tools and methods that will help them where they're at. Because not everything is applicable on every job, and so there's an element of adaptation, in my opinion, that needs to take place. And I've learned that the hard way. I've been screamed at by enough superintendents in my few years to know that not everything works on every job. And so that's my personal growth now is really how do we take the hundreds of projects that we have and how do we develop it's the same principle, but a tailored approach to projects so people see value. And yeah.
Sure. Oh yeah. Let me ask you this: if someone was new to Graham and they said, "Hey, IPD," which is integrated project delivery, but if someone was new and they said, "Hey, Dominic, what's IPD mean?" How would you describe it to them?
How would I describe this to him? Well, the integrated form of agreement it's a delivery model. It's a delivery model that is quite flexible and that allows for the integrations of people in the design world, us as a general contractor and the selected trade partners to come together and really form a project first culture and approach and a deployment of systems and control that is specific to the project. From a control perspective, the model is all open book, so it's different for some people, and we share risk and we share rewards, and we separate cost and profit. and we put all of our profit in the one pot, and the performance of the project determines how much gets distributed at the end. So it really changes the conversations and the framework of delivery from more of a relational type approach, away from coming a contractual and transactional approach. So it's in my opinion, it's a much better way to do construction. I think it's going to grow over the years. I think we're just seeing the beginning of this, and it's been proven already. What's interesting in construction is that we are really one of the last industry to actively separate design and construction. If you
purposely separate it.
Purposefully, purposefully, and we think that there's value in that, right? And people often think that the productivity and the efficiencies or productivity that comes out of manufacturing comes out of repetition, but repetition is only one aspect of productivity. It accounts for 20 to 25% of labor component. The difference, or one of the big difference, is really that not all, but most manufacturers have they're responsible for their product, the design of their product, and the assets and fabrication of their product within one roof. Right? And in construction, the product owner or specifier is the owner, and the designer is our engineers or architects, and then we do production. So these three elements of product, design, and fabrication are in three buckets, whereas in manufacturing it's usually in one bucket. Companies like Toyota, GM, Ford, or any of those, and so there's synergy that are getting created in that triangle, if you will. And out of those synergy comes productivity. And so when you think about, what IPD is to create this temporary ecosystem where design, fabrication, and the specification of the product coexist, and where you can put the brains of everybody and assign them toward a common goal. And so there's benefits coming out of that.
I like how you phrase that temporary ecosystem, right? Because it sounds like you're not only changing the delivery model, but also the mindset approach to how we build not only the building, but also the relationship.
Yeah, it takes it takes every specialties from both sides of the fabrication and design to be able to build a building. And so to have all of these people being able to exchange and understand each other's approach and limitations and assets and what they can and can't do, it's extremely useful. I learned this when I was back in designing factories, right? I tried to lay out machines, and I tried to lay out flow in the plant, but the operators are the people who were physically handling the product. And they had access to a wealth of information that I couldn't conceive or dream of when I was sitting at my desk. And I couldn't comprehend when I, walked in the plant and did some observation, because I couldn't be there for 2 years, 24 hours a day, watching every product flow, right? And so there's an enormous amount of value in bringing those who do the work in the room and help us co-design. The savings that you find there, that is often more than the delta and low bid when you do design, bid, build, right? So if you have a design that's hard to construct and you go to market and you have various pricing, yeah, the lowest price on that non-constructible or hard to construct design is still higher than picking the smartest one of the bidder and have them with you in the room to help you co-design. Your cost will be less.
And that concept applies all the way throughout the process, right? Design and construction, but also general contractor and trade partner, and having the people actually doing the work part of building the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still dealing with that legacy. I mean, to me, it came out of Taylor 100 years ago and the division of labor, right? And then, you know, out of that came the blue collar and the white collar, you know, and out of that came the white hat and the blue hat. You know, all of that division gets you so far in terms of productivity. You know, from having no systems, it was better. You know, it helped increase productivity. Scientific management helped increase productivity. But the next step is really the reintegration in the brains of all the people who do the work. That's how you achieve the next frontier of improvement.
What's some on that same note? What's some of the feedback you've gotten from folks at Graham, trade partners on your project, about some of the lean systems you guys are implementing? What's some of the feedback been like?
There is a variety of of feedback. We've had trades calling us back and asking why such and such projects PM and superintendent weren't deploying the last planner system on site, and that they could be benefits in doing this. I remember having a conversation with a trade partner once, who said, I'm not sure what happened there, but I use significantly less labor than what I used to, and I'm not really sure I know why. And I hear great things about happening there. So explain to me, what this is all about. And I actually went and spent a day with them, and I taught them some things around the waste and seeing work, and we did the parade of trade, and so and got them on their lean journey, and they secured a consultant since then, and are quite active now in applying lean to construction. But lots of people, once they get on the other side of an IPD project, would say that if they could choose, they'd build this way again.
Hell yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
And with the last planner system, we're deploying this on all contract models. So there you get a bit more of a mitigated view. So sometime it works really, really good, and you create flow, and sometimes it's harder based on how everybody shows up and the type of constraints that you have, and the response time of the consultants, and the level of developments, and the decision making ability of the owner. And sometimes it's not their fault. It's just it's difficult to run issues up the flagpole, if you will, and they have their own challenges with delegation of authority. And late decisions and poor information leads to delays in procurement of material. And this, if you don't have the instruction on what to build and the material to build it, guess what happens? You're not doing anything, right? And
you're not building it.
You're not building it, right? So decision, flow to information, flow to material, flow to work. And so if there's an issue upstream, then you get back to this lack of flow and planning on a week by week basis and generating frustration. So there's an array of outcome that exists in deploying lean. And it doesn't mean that if you're struggling on your first project that the second one will be difficult. And you could also have, I've got a good friend of mine now who's had a phenomenal experience on a project in doing IPD, and now it's a bit harder. He's back to this lump sum world, and um it's harder. So
What's one way you see people maybe misapplying lean, or using some of the lean concepts in a misguided fashion? I'll give one example. Sometimes what I see is folks who will go through a pool plan, right? And then they'll kind of weaponize that information, and as some variables change and things happen throughout the project, they'll go back and they'll say, no, but it's supposed to be this, and there's no room for flexibility, right? The schedule is not nimble. What are some ways that you see folks misapplying lean?
um I think I made a post on this recently. To me, missing the piece in pull planning, that it's about making commitments and the conversation and learning and exchanging of information, so the team of last planners get a better appreciation from everybody's capacity, work constraints, and all of that. So I've seen projects who tend to skip that part because it's the harder part. There's nothing as hard as soft
It's
skills, they say, right?
it's the part that's hard to measure, right? I mean, how do you measure connection and exchange of ideas and trust? You can measure days on a calendar, right? But those things that you're mentioning, they're just harder to measure.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to measure. It takes a little time. And so I've seen people reverting back too quickly to, we're doing traditional look ahead with sticky notes, or we're going to use one of the software technology, and it's very convenient and easy. Nobody needs to get in the same room anymore. Everybody could do the plan from their own place. Just put them on your board and then go put it to where it belongs. And we don't need to talk. Don't come to the trailer. That's a waste of time. Just, so you're basically doing Gantt chart scheduling with post-its.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have the false sense of security, or they believe that this is more efficient, um, because there's less transcription, there's less writing, there's less time together in the room. And the thing that I always say is, um, it's better to have a better plan and be less efficient at creating it than
Mhm.
to be really, really efficient at creating a plan that's not effective.
Well,
Right?
I think that speaks to a little bit of a systems thinking approach, right? I mean, efficiency for me, it may be as a superintendent, right? It may take me longer to do something and I have to put more time in, but if it becomes efficient for the system, it's worth it.
Right.
And I think some people view their own efficiency greater than the efficiency of the system.
Right. Yeah. Well, we are trained to, stay in your lane, right? Stay in your lane, do your thing. I mean, we learned that from Deming in the 60s. I think Deming said, it's a mistake to believe that if everybody does their part, everything will be okay. The whole system may be in trouble. And so that's what you're referring to here is lean is really, to me, is really about reconnecting people. So we've been using the division of labor, and we've been telling everybody what to do. We've been encoding that into contracts. We've been trying to tell them where they needed to be on site, by but the thing we got to do now is we got to recreate that human connection and those conversation. um and uh and that is one of the thing that is counterintuitive to people, I think. I mean, we used to talk more to one another 50 years ago or 30 years ago, right? Like there was no
Sure.
cell phone when I went to high school. That sounds like a crazy thing. I mean, you'll have young people who listen to this. I think we had a pager, right? So you got a little pager, and then you're like, oh, somebody called me. And then you needed to find a public phone to put
Yeah.
your quarter in to call your friend back. Um, but in those years we would spend, I think, more time, and people who have been in construction before me would say that to you, is I think we used to talk more face to face, and now technology has accelerated the transfer of information, but it's also
Sure.
separated us
Yeah.
more than we used to be.
Well, I think part of the driver in that is there's now this communication loop where back then with a pager, and I don't know, I'm just guessing, but back then with the pager, the people closest to the work were talking to each other, right? And now
Mhm.
we've created a little bit of a system where somebody close to the work has to talk to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else to get back to talking to the person closest to the work, right? Call it the last planners. The idea behind the last planners is those are the guys and girls closest to the work. And our communication system has gotten away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, so on back to the question, like on underestimating or undervaluing the human connection and the exchange between people. I think that's often a mistake. The other thing that I'm more on now, perhaps than I used to be, that I'd say I learned this the hard way too, is the management team of a project includes all the last planners. And so if as a general contractor we want to deploy lean on site, we have to take on the responsibility, and part of the coaching plan is to go in and teach our trade partners. And there's an element of respect here in terms of, yeah, is the team committed to do this? And if for me, if oh, we'll teach our own team, and then the team says, yes, we're going to do this, or not a chance, this is right. And so there's a first filter that we need to do to determine whether or not we're going to invest more time on the project, whether or not we're going to take the time to teach the trades, because we're taking their labor hours, right? We're taking times to teach them things. And then and then you generate enthusiasm and you generate buy-in. Well, you have to back it up with execution, right? If you teach people and you don't do it, we're frustrating people for no reason. Or if we're teaching people, yeah, and we don't have the intention of doing it, that's to me, that's just that's just a bad delivery, or bad deployment. So I think making sure that as a project team, including your your PMs, your project director, your owners, however your structure, speaking for a general contractor here, you have this conversation up front and you say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to support the project, properly. There's training that will need to take place. We'll need to take on and come in and teach our trade partners. I think all of that has to happen if you want to be able to, show positive result, not just for ourselves, but for our partners involved.
Sure, 100%. And to take that a step further, right? It's how do you make the work easier, better, more efficient for the person doing it, right? If you're implementing all these things and somebody says, "Hey, what's in it for me?" and you say, "Well, I don't know what's in it for you," right? Then
Right.
they're not gonna buy in. They're not gonna be enthusiastic. So it's all about making the work better for the people doing it, and that applies to all levels. But there has to be something in it for them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. 100%. Our trades should experience savings in labor,
Mhm.
right? And so, regardless of which model you're in, even if we're in a traditional lump sum environment, they should see a difference in profit at the end of the project, in comparison to what happens traditionally. As a GC, we're reducing risk, We get better control of flow. From an owner's perspective, you're securing an outcome. You got a turnover that is more predictable. From a consultant perspective, when the team does make ready, because that's the other piece in my mind. The key of last planner is not pull planning; it's make ready, and constraint removal, and understanding what that takes. We've ran some experiments or collected some data that shows that constraint could take anywhere from 16 weeks to 1 week to be resolved. Okay, so as part of the last planner, you do your 6-week look ahead, you find constraints, you realize that constraint cannot be resolved within the 6 weeks window. You're starting to create flow breakage in the field and people get frustrated. Well, guess what? You have to put a system in place that is more proactive and that start looking at some major constraints or some issues sooner than the 6 weeks, right? And so when that happens, consultants will see, we'll be thankful, or we'll see benefits in terms of us bringing issues not last minute, and not putting a gun on their head and say, I need an answer to this by tomorrow, right?
What does that system look like? That proactive system that helps add some clarity to potential problems. What's that system look like?
It's make ready. It's part of the last planner system. The only thing that you gotta adjust is the 6-week window. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's 6 weeks. For your projects, it could be 10 weeks. For somebody else's project, it could be longer, right? And so to me, it's really about being a little more proactive into diving into constructability reviews, walking through the work. It doesn't necessarily have to be with sticky notes. You can do this with drawings. Sure. But just walk through the elements of work, and also have conversations with your owner to understand on their side, what is their process if XYZ type problem surfaces, right? So if you get a short, small $5,000 issue, as an owner's rep or an owner's PM, can you make decision yourself? And what's the threshold for this to be elevated to your director? And what's the threshold for this to be elevated to your vice president? And what's the threshold for this to be signed off by some sort of board of director? Yeah. So if you have a better understanding of that, and as you're watching the work happen in front of you, you can adjust your priority as far as how you're reviewing what's coming up. It doesn't have to be every single thing today. You can spread the route. We kind of already do this. Yeah. It's just you can put a little more structure to it.
That's right. That's the beauty. That's the beauty about lean is there's some parts and pieces that we already do and we just don't call it lean, right?
Yeah, it's not, I'm not a proponent of throwing all the old and this is all new things. It's a way to reorganize lots of what we already do. Some things we do less of and something we do more of. But we have a bit of a thanks to the people who have come up with this, we have a bit of a better framework to work with. And if you stick to the fundamental principle of the framework, and not get overly married to every single one of the tools, you can mold whatever that is to the uniqueness of your project. Right?
So give me an example or tell me a story. I mean, give me an example of a project where you've molded it to fit. It wasn't necessarily the traditional lean tool by the book, right? But you've molded the framework for it to fit that project.
Yeah. So we've had I've had projects on the smaller side, whose most of the production planning effort was done with sticky notes and was carried on the wall.
Mm.
And we've had bigger project that needed a little bit more of a contractually a documentation of that activity. So we're adjusting the framework of our P6 schedule to move it from traditional scope based to location based, and then we govern our pull plans by location, and then we take that information and we do it on the wall, or we can do it in the software, and then you transfer it to P6. So now for larger projects that has that requirement, you can marry both worlds. So to me, it's not a last planner or P6. You can blend the two. I there's also this idea of do we plan in reverse? I don't know how you got trained on pull planning, but we got this problem in Canada where the moment that there's sticky notes in a wall somewhere, people call this pull planning, and so I've seen people doing pull planning forward, and I've seen people do pull planning backwards, and I've seen people pull planning by zones, and I've seen people do pull planning by so we have a name in multiple ways, right?
Sure.
So there are some work elements that I plan forward and not backwards, and there are elements of work that I plan backwards and not forward. So it depends on where we're at and what we know and what we don't know, and so you can adjust the way you do your plans, right? You can do weekly work plans on a board like one of these section, right?
Mm-hmm.
With sticky notes, or you can do it on a piece of paper. So there's ways that you can adapt some of those tools. If I jump on the projects and I have people who are getting close to the end, right? So they're in the last 3-4 months and they want to give it a go. Well, I look at what's left, and we give them the tools that they could practice for the next 3-4 months. You don't give them the whole gamut from start to finish.
Sure, 100%. So on that note, what piece of advice would you give to someone who's implementing lean at an organizational level?
I used this analogy to kind of describe to people what I think the 4 key elements are.
Mm-hmm.
And I make a comparison to a pizza.
Okay.
I like
You got
simple
my
things.
interest now.
I like simple examples. So in my opinion, there's 4 key ingredients to a pizza. There's a crust, the sauce, the pepperoni, and cheese. Right? If you don't have these 4 things, I'm not sure if it's called a pizza.
Okay.
And then you can add all kinds of flavor to it, but you somehow have to have a crust, have a sauce, have protein, and have cheese. And the crust is really your leadership support. So you have to have some sort of leadership or some sort of support from a leadership perspective. And if you think of that pizza, the crust is really what allows you to spread the other ingredients, put it in the oven, take it out without making a big mess, right? Try to cook a pizza without crust. I mean, you'll be scraping the inside of your oven, right? And that's what allows you to carve it into pieces and serve it to people, right? So that's the first ingredient. The second ingredient, you need to have some sort of expertise, internal expertise. And I kind of equate it to the sauce, right? So that's where you give it your flavor. You can hide some of the things that you'd like to do. But so I think you need to have some sort of internal capacity. When you start on your journey, that rarely do company go and hire a guy like me or any other buddy that are out there on the market. They'll secure that early expertise through consultants. And so, if I was to make an advice to companies would be, get that consulting expertise, get them to show you what this looks like. Get them to give you or give some of your key people a taste of what lean is all about, but be prepared that you'll need this internally. You'll need to find a person to guide your journey. You'll need some sort of mentorship, and if it's on your payroll, it's better because you can give them access to all your company data. They can have access to all your problems.
They can be there. They can live the problem with you.
They can live the problem with you. So that's number 2.
Okay.
Number 3 is really with that person. That's the meat. You need to build your internal system. Mm-hmm. So whatever training you need, whatever set of tools you need, that needs to be built internally. So we do I do our own training now. We have our own material, and that training connects with our quality management system, our safety management system, our project control systems, our scheduling team, with virtual construction. And so if you believe enough in something, like you wouldn't run a company with a safety manual borrowed on the shelf from a third-party organization, right? You shouldn't do that with lean either. If you believe in it, you'll build your own. And that will give you stability. That gives a place for people to rally around, and that gives a place for people to come back and drive improvements because it's your own, right? Yeah. And the last piece, which is the thing that most people see, is the cheese. And to me, this is really your local coaches. So this is the people who are closest to your projects, who can go at a drop of a call and say, hey, I finally have all of my trades. Well, not all my trades. I got a chunk of my trades bought in. I got everybody to dig the hole and get back to grade. I have the excavator, the concrete guy, the piling guy, the M&E guy in. Can you come in and do a coaching session with them? And so the timing of that is difficult to manage depending on how spread your company is. So you need somebody that's relatively local. And then you got your leaders buying into it. You got some expertise to build your system. You've got systems that are built, and then you got people who can go and deal with all the day-to-day and the project as it comes live. In the absence of all of that, because that happened, right? That's kind of, if there's no pizza parlor in your neighborhood, then you gotta make your own. So start a committee. Don't go too big. Don't oversell this to everybody. Gather a core group of people, project manager, superintendent. I don't like the term committee, but call it a committee or a community of practice or a working group, but gather people who are right, or a group of champion, right? And gather these people and use kind of what I talked about and support each other in creating kind of your own way of doing this, and creating some consistency so you can learn from project to project, and as it grows and people start to talk about what happens, you'll be able to get traction from that.
You hit on something. You hit on something there, and I think that's another big misconception is lean isn't going to solve your problems or eliminate them. It's going to let you see your problems and give you a path to deal with your problems. But lean's not a fix it all thing, right? It doesn't just make your problems go away.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this a few years back. It was from a gentleman in California, actually. We were at a conference, and we were talking about some of the benefits that we were experiencing with Last Planner, and he looked at me and he said, as it started to show you some of the problem that you're experiencing in your company, or as it started to show you company-wide type issues. And
Right.
at first, I'm like, I'm not sure if it has, but he planted a seed, and then as we started to investigate some of the failures or challenges or lessons learned, and problems that we were experiencing in some of those deployment, you could start to tie this back to some of the things in the way that our company was governed that needed to be changed or improved. So yeah, it's not a you go do this there and that's going to make things better. There's issues everywhere. Like every company's got problems. Like I
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever worked in a place that had no problems. Right?
That's the continuous improvement, right? It's an ongoing process.
Yeah, and if you don't have problems today, guess what? The market will switch on you within a year or two and problems will show up.
If
Right?
you don't have problems, you may be looking in the wrong direction, right? I'm a big believer that if there's a problem, the first place I'm looking is me.
Yeah. If you don't have problem, it's because you're not looking. That's a perfect sentence. If you don't have problems because you're not looking, or you're not interested in seeing them. Which is actually a very interesting thing, because some people will get frightened by what lean surfaces.
What do you mean by that? Give me some context there.
So if you got people who think that things could be better, and the business has been running and things are okay, and then you start to teach people waste and learn to see and do observation circles and observe the work, but also start to question why things get stalled. You teach them flow, and then you get people to start to see breakage and flow, and people start to question what happens. You can find all kinds of issues. You can surface issues in the way that you have acknowledged competencies of individual, right? So you could have promoted people too early or too late, right? So you might find some issues there. Back in the days when we were doing this and we were deploying like just-in-time material delivery in the plant, that's when we started to realize that we had data problem. Our information wasn't accurate. We thought it was accurate. Nobody was really doing a deep dive, but the way that we tracked information and structure information needed to be changed, and we found issues there. And so what looked like a little improvement over here opened a big can of worm over there, right? But now that you see it, it's like, oh my gosh, like I cannot look there anymore. We have to fix this. Right? And so so people could feel nervous when you're opening all these closets and you're finding all these skeletons, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
and them skeletons were in there for years. Yeah.
Yeah, and people say, Well, we've never really had to open that closet before. So if I don't open it moving forward and I don't know it's there, so I mean that's kind of, I heard somebody said once, we didn't have any of these problems before we started looking into lean, and I said, well, you did, you just didn't see them.
Mm.
All right.
That's a good
and,
one. I like that one.
And not seeing them, there's, because when you see them, there's work, and when there's work, it often forces you to shift your priority, right? And so you might have communicated things down the chain of command, and then you find a problem. So that happened to me, as a plant manager. This is where we're going, and then you find a problem, and then people don't like the remedy because you have to pause what you said you were going to do, change the course of where you're heading, to address an issues you discovered, right? But that that's part of leadership, and why you need leadership engagers, because sometimes you'll unfortunately find things, and not every problem is easy to solve. Some problems are easier to shove aside than they are to solve.
Sure.
Right? And
not every problem is caused in the location you see it, right? I run into that a lot on the field side of things. As we see the problem in the field, that's not where the problem was caused. It was caused upstream, right?
yeah, and then now what's the source of it, right? It's either decision, information, material, and work. So you go back
Yeah.
up, and there's a piece of information that's either missing, was wrong, and now you have to face that music, and now there is a, I don't want to use the term political, but there's a social component
Sure.
of solving an issue with people, who who perhaps are your clients, right? And sometimes it's harder to have a tough conversation with your client than it is to have it with your trades, right? And so who are you going to have it with? And but when you're aware of those issues, to me, that's where the real lean leader that I've seen in my career, are the people who don't go at people for who they are, but they take the time to really understand the problem, can describe and explain the impact of the problems, and go to the source to fix it at the source, regardless how painful that is.
100%. Yeah, and that's the epitome of respect for people, right? Respect's not just niceness and kindness. It's going at the root of the problem, and it's blaming processes and not people. Can we fix the process to where this person isn't likely to do that same thing again?
Yeah, and if it's it's letting people know where the problems really are, and so they can act on them, and they can learn from their mistakes if they made a mistake, or they can solve their internal process if that's an outcome of their process. But yeah.
Oh yeah. We're actually a couple minutes over time. Dominic, is there anything that you want to hit that we didn't hit? Any last words of wisdom?
I think we covered a lot of ground here. The only thing that perhaps I want to say is that real flow, and that the epitome of what we are trying to do with lean is difficult to achieve. and it's difficult to sustain. There's all kinds of rocks that want to get in the way. There's always new problems that will surface. So I want, so it's a never ending pursuit, right? And so you're never going to get there because there's no there. Right? And in some cases, it'll be easier to feel the benefits. And in some cases, it'll be harder to feel the benefits. And that will change, over time. So don't beat yourself up as a lean champion. If you have failures, make the time to understand, why that happened. It most likely is not your fault. And then see what you can learn from there, and change something slightly to see if that makes it better. Next time. But there's benefits here. There's a tremendous benefits for everybody in the industry, whether it's the owner, consultants, GC, or subtrades and workers. It's a fun journey. If you're already here and listening to this, I know you're probably living the struggle, but I think there's lights at the end of the tunnel. We have the chance. That's the one last thing. That's the inspirational thing, right?
Go for it.
We have the chance to live in an industry that will never disappear. Okay? For as long as humans are on this planet, we will need shelter. Okay? So the CD-ROM disc business disappeared. The tape cassette business disappeared. The pager business disappeared. I had a BlackBerry when I was younger, the Research in Motion, right? So a lot of industries come and go. We will be here in 1,000 years. Okay? So our industry will never disappear. And I think that we owe it to future generation to make it better. And because we're always going to be in needs of building. So working construction is an enormous chance. It's a privilege. We're affecting the way society is operating. Let's just keep doing this, but make it better for our people, better for our community, and lean has a role to play in that. So that's what I'll finish with.
I love that. We're going to end on that. Thank you for sharing that, and appreciate you sharing all the wisdom, my man.